The night before my military wedding, someone shaved my head clean. 12 years of waist-length hair was gone, leaving nothing but pale, stubbled scalp. Riley Marlowe stood there in a high ponytail, clippers in one hand, grinning lazily at Nathaniel Voss beside her. Your fiancé's got terrible situational awareness. Spoiled little rich girl raised on Fort Hammond, didn't even notice someone snuck into her quarters. How's she supposed to keep up with a colonel like you? The battalion commanders and staff officers of the Special Forces Brigade sitting around them burst out laughing. Come on, Staff Sergeant Marlowe, that's not fair. That calming aromatherapy pouch was hung right over her bed by the colonel himself. Who'd ever suspect their own fiancé? Riley snorted, twirling the clippers in her hand. Wedding's tomorrow. Anyone who sees her'll think the colonel didn't bring home a bride. He dragged a nun back from some mountain hermitage. Ha! Over the roar of laughter in the room, Nathaniel looked over at me, a flicker of half-hearted apology on his face. These guys fought side by side with me on the frontier. It's just a joke. Don't take it to heart. Put on your veil and wig tomorrow, no one'll notice a thing. You'll still be my wife, walked in with all the pomp and ceremony you deserve. I tried to move my limbs, but they felt heavy and useless. My eyes locked onto that pouch hanging by the bed. Last night, Nathaniel had come to my quarters and tied it there himself. This is made with Arctic valerian root from the Alaskan frontier range. It's the best thing for calming your nerves and helping you sleep. You've got a long day tomorrow, so get a good rest tonight. I'd thought about the 20 years we'd known each other, growing up together on Fort Hammond since we were toddlers. Never in a million years would I have guessed he'd laced it with a strong sedative strong enough to knock me out cold. The officers in the room noticed I'd woken up and wasn't speaking, and quickly jumped in to defend Riley. Don't be mad, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Marlowe's just messing around. She's always been a prankster, we've all been on the receiving end of it. We timed it with the colonel's wedding, drove all the way back from the frontier just to surprise you. I stared down at the dark hair scattered across the floor, a tangled black heap that felt just like the 20 years of history we'd shattered into pieces. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, my voice rough as sandpaper. Surprise? This is Nathaniel Voss's idea of a surprise? Riley twirled the clippers, raising an eyebrow as she looked me up and down. I was just curious. What kind of woman could the colonel pine after for 20 years, dead set on marrying her and no one else? She paused, contempt dripping from every word. Turns out she's just some sheltered princess who's never seen a real firefight. Everyone in the room knew exactly what she was implying. I cut straight to the point. So what you're saying, Staff Sergeant, is that I'm not good enough for him? Is that it? Nathaniel stood by the bed, his jaw tightening instantly. He barked my name. Eleanor. Riley didn't mean anything by it. She's always been rough around the edges, speaks before she thinks. Why were you picking apart every word she says? Riley chimed in. Whether I think you're a match or not, Nate's still gonna marry you, right? So what are you moping about? Throw on a thick veil tomorrow, and no one'll know your hair's gone. Quit looking like someone died, all this girlish drama's exhausting. But I hadn't shed a single tear since I'd woken up. I looked straight at Nathaniel, slow and deliberate. Nate. You're just gonna let her humiliate me like this? Nathaniel sighed and stepped forward to take my hand, but I flinched away. Riley's my ride or die. That's just how she is, shoots her mouth off, but she's got a good heart. Let's just drop it, okay? Riley huffed and clipped the clippers to her tactical belt. Nathaniel softened his tone, trying to coax me. Eleanor, look at it this way, I'm the one who gave you that pouch. If you're gonna blame anyone, blame me. But even as he said it, there was arrogance in his face, like he was sure that after 20 years of loving him, I could never actually hate him. I stared at his face. I'd known that face since I was 3 years old. When I was 11, some older army brats cornered me and tried to steal my father's medal. Nate grabbed a training rifle and charged at them. Back then, he'd have fought anyone who so much as touched a hair on my head. When I was 17, right after my birthday, he graduated from military academy. He showed up at my door with a medal of his own, scared some other guy would sweep me off my feet, desperate to promise me forever. When I was 20, he was deployed to the Alaskan frontier for peacekeeping duty. At the base gates, he squeezed my hand, eyes red, and said he'd come back and marry me with all the fanfare in the world. Then he spent 4 years fighting through hails of bullets in the frontier mountains. And I spent 4 years waiting quietly for him in my quarters on Fort Hammond. Now that pouch still hung over my bed. The cedar scent that once felt like safety now reeked of sharp, chemical sedative, silently mocking how stupid I'd been. This wasn't the first time I'd seen Riley's hostility. Last year, I'd begged my dad for weeks to let me take the base transport helicopter out to the forward operating base on the Alaskan frontier to see him. But when I got there, Nate didn't look happy to see me at all. He spent every day in the command room, running battle simulations with Riley over the sand table. Even seeing me for 5 minutes felt like a waste of time to him. I asked the radio man to pass along a message 3 times. Finally, Riley taped a sign right to the steel door of the command room. It read, "Eleanor Hale and stray dogs are prohibited from entering the command room." I'd been furious and hurt, and I'd yelled at Nate about it. But he just looked at me coldly and said, "Riley didn't mean anything by it. She's just blunt. And besides, you were the one disrupting operations. You were in the wrong." I'd known right then that the scales in Nate's heart had tipped so far they'd never balance again. Nate was still standing by the bed, repeating that line like it was some grand, romantic gesture. "Eleanor, look at it this way, I'm the one who gave you that pouch. If you're gonna blame anyone, blame me." At his words, Riley suddenly grabbed a combat knife off the table, flipped it open, and pressed the blade to her own long hair. "It's just hair, right? I'll shave mine off too, if that's what it takes. I'd sacrifice way more than this for my brother. Don't hate Nate." She said it like it was some noble sacrifice, but the blade didn't even press hard enough to cut a single strand. Watching her fake drama, I suddenly laughed. "Then do it." Riley's hand froze. I leaned forward, slow and sharp. "Shave it." The blade inched forward a fraction, but she put no pressure behind it. Not one hair broke. Riley gritted her teeth. This is for my brother." "Fine, I'll do it." That's when Nate lunged forward. He drew his service pistol and used the grip to knock the knife right out of her hand. He turned to me, face dark with rage. "That's enough, Eleanor. You're being completely unreasonable." I froze. He practically snarled the words through clenched teeth. "Riley's my ride or die. She's taken bullets for me in minefields. Why do you keep picking on her? She's spent 4 years fighting on that frontier. She's spilled more blood than you've shed tears in your entire life. You see another woman and immediately think she's out to steal your man. Riley's got bigger things to worry about: border security, her brother's lives. What do you care about? Nothing but yourself?" Riley tugged at his sleeve, putting on a fake, placating tone. Nate, stop. She's your fiancé, after all. But Nate didn't stop tearing into me. Fiancé or not, she's spent too long on this base. Her world's the size of a pinhead. Riley was just testing your situational awareness. That's standard recon training in our brigade. Why can't you just let it go? And you tried to make her shave her head too. Don't you know our bodies are gifts from our parents? I stood there, listening to every cruel, gut-wrenching word. I'd told myself 100 times that I needed to let Nate go. But right then, it still felt like someone had their fist wrapped tight around my heart. A sharp, throbbing ache spread through every vein, every bone and muscle in my body. I stared at the heap of black hair on the floor, and suddenly I knew. I really did hate Nathaniel Voss. Pale dawn light streaked the sky. I heard footsteps outside my quarters door. Nate's face fell. He grabbed the other officers and snuck out through the back window, climbing over the fence. My mother pushed the door open, carrying a mug of cinnamon honey apple cider. Ellie, tomorrow's your big day. I made you some. She got halfway through the sentence before the mug slipped out of her hand and shattered on the floor, hot cider spilling everywhere. Mom stared at my shaved head, eyes going wide. Her voice shook so bad I could barely understand her. Where's your hair? She looked down at the hair scattered across the floor and panicked. What? What happened? Who did this? I had sharp ears. I heard Riley snicker, just barely, from the other side of the back fence. I put my hand over Mom's trembling one, quiet and steady. It's okay, Mom. Tears burst from her eyes. The wedding's tomorrow. How are you gonna walk down the aisle? Every commanding officer's family on base is gonna be there. What are we gonna tell the Vosses? I looked her dead in the eye. Mom, I texted Adrian Thorne. I'm switching grooms. After I sent the message, Mom wiped her tears and walked out. By evening, I had a reply from Adrian. Just 10 words, wedding goes on as planned. Leave the rest to me. Tomorrow was the wedding, but I tossed and turned all night. Finally, I just sat by the window, staring blankly as I ran my fingers over my hand-embroidered ivory wedding gown, 6 months in the making. Deep in the night, everyone in the residential district was asleep. The door suddenly slid open. Nathaniel stood in the doorway with Riley behind him. No other officers this time. When he saw me sitting there with the gown, a flicker of real guilt crossed his face. Riley spoke first, casual and dismissive. Eleanor. We're even now. I didn't follow. I looked up. What do you mean? Riley stepped forward and tugged down the collar of her combat uniform. All over her pale neck and shoulders were dark, messy love bites, trailing down past her collar. They burned like a brand. That Arctic valerian extract? It knocks you out cold. On him? Different effect entirely. Riley shrugged like it was no big deal. When I was mixing your pouch, I had some leftover. Didn't throw it all away. Next thing I know. Nathaniel stood there, face dark, and said nothing. Riley kept going. He wasn't in his right mind, and I wasn't expecting it. So. Yeah. We're even. You lost your hair. I lost my innocence. I stared at those brutal, glaring marks, then turned to look at Nate. Nate took a step forward. Eleanor, I ruined Riley. I have to make this right. Let's postpone the wedding tomorrow. Postpone. Again. 7 years had passed since he'd promised me forever when I was 17. I didn't have years left to waste waiting for him. Even if I wasn't gonna marry him anymore, I had to ask. Why should I? Nate frowned. Excuse me? I held his gaze, slow and clear. I said, why do I have to postpone again? Judgment flashed in his eyes instantly. How can you say that? Riley's whole life is changed. Don't you have any sympathy? Eleanor, when did you get so cold? Riley waved a hand, putting on a show of being generous. Nate, it's fine. I don't care. We're ride or die. This is nothing. But Nate was firm. No. You gave up everything for me. I owe you. Once this border mission's done, I'll file the paperwork. Get your spousal relocation sorted. Bring you onto the base full-time. Riley blinked, then glanced at me. What about Eleanor? First come, first served. Nate glanced at me. She was engaged to me first. You came after. Officially, she'll be my wife, the Colonel's spouse. You'll live with us. No one'll dare say a word. Riley nodded. Fine by me. I don't care about titles or formalities anyway. My brow dropped. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Are you insane? Nate kept trying to soothe me. But it's different in my heart. She's my brother. You're my wife. On paper you're the official one, but you're the one I love most. Watching them tag-team their little speech, I suddenly laughed. I didn't care anymore if I was the person closest to Nathaniel Voss. I'm not postponing the wedding. Nate's face darkened. Eleanor, do you have to be so selfish? Selfish or not, I said, I will be at that wedding tomorrow, on time. Nate stared at me for a long time, then finally nodded, jaw tight. Fine. If you can't cut Riley any slack, and you're just dead set on being the Colonel's wife. He paused, his voice as cold as the Alaskan frontier ice. Don't say I didn't warn you. The next morning, I sat at my vanity and put on my custom-made wig. The hand-embroidered ivory wedding gown made me stand tall, poised and regal. The scheduled wedding hour arrived. Mom took my arm and walked me toward the residential district gates. The base gates swung open. I looked out at the so-called wedding procession, and spotted Nathaniel immediately, standing at the front. He wasn't wearing the custom groom's suit. He was in his usual desert camo fatigues. And the procession behind him was laughably small. No armored Cadillac limos with military plates, no booming military band, no red silk drapes lining the base roads. Just 2 drivers from the Voss family, loitering by a pair of army trucks. Not a single bouquet between them. When Nate saw me, he visibly relaxed and strode forward. There was relief in his voice. Eleanor, when I went back to the house this morning, my mom told me the wedding was off. The whole drive over, I was terrified you'd actually call it off. My stomach was in knots. But seeing you in that gown? I knew you'd do the right thing. I glanced at his sad little procession, then back at his uniform. I tugged at the corner of my mouth. This is what the great Colonel Voss calls a wedding? This is the best you've got? Nate frowned, clearly annoyed. Eleanor, you're the one who insisted on today. I can't do Riley wrong. So you're coming onto the base as a regular military spouse. That's it. I stared at him, and it was almost funny. He kept calling Riley his brother, But what kind of brother requires you to give them the colonel's wife's treatment as compensation? I looked down at my gown. Regular spouses wear everyday clothes to their weddings. Let me make this clear, I am not some secret, second-rate nobody. Nate's frown deepened, anger sharpening his voice. I told you yesterday. I have to make this right for Riley. First come, first served. Her paperwork goes through first. Those are the rules. And I didn't have time to plan a big procession today. Why do you care so much about all this flashy nonsense? I laughed. Didn't have time? Nate, you promised me forever when I was 17. If we're talking first come, first served, who was first? Who's the real one? Nate's face went dark. Eleanor, are you really still hung up on that? Can't you be reasonable? Riley's life is ruined. I owe her an explanation. When you move in today, you'll get the house, you'll get the benefits, everything you're owed. Why fight over one day of fanfare? Before I could answer, the shriek of tires on asphalt cut through the air. Nate dove behind his guard on instinct. A tranquilizer dart whizzed past his ear and slammed into the sycamore tree beside him, burying itself deep in the bark. He looked up sharply. At the end of the base road, another wedding procession was rolling in, grand and unmissable. 8 armored Cadillacs led the way, draped in red silk, flanked by bodyguards in black suits. Behind them stretched a miles-long motorcade of wedding gifts and escorts, lining the whole street. Red silk carpeted the road, a military band played loud and proud, and every base press outlet was there with cameras. The whole street went quiet at the sheer scale of it. At the very front of the procession stood Adrian Thorne. He wore a custom-tailored white tuxedo. He looked down at Nathaniel, his voice low and sharp. Colonel Voss. You dare dismiss and disrespect my wife? Nate was completely stunned. He stood frozen, glancing between me and Adrian, voice shaking. Eleanor? What's going on? Why does General Thorne call you his wife? I lifted the hem of my gown, stepped past him, and walked straight toward that grand procession. Because today's our wedding day. I didn't look back. My voice was cold as ice. Nate. Don't make me late. I heard his hurried footsteps behind me. He ran to grab my arm, but the theater command guard slammed him to the ground before he could touch me. Panic laced his voice, raw with disbelief. You. What? We're engaged. You're supposed to marry me. How can you? I turned to face him, slow and steady. I don't belong to anyone. And I won't be someone's dirty little secret. Nate's face flushed bright red, scrambling to explain. It was a temporary fix. I told you, Riley, I cut him off. I don't care about Riley. All I know is, you promised me forever when I was 17. I waited 4 years, then 3 more. Again and again, you told me to wait, to back down, to put up with it. I'm done, Nate. With that, I turned and climbed into the custom-armored Cadillac at the center of the procession. As the door clicked shut, I looked through the window and saw him still standing there, lost and panicked. Adrian looked down at Nathaniel, pinned to the ground, his tone lazy with contempt. Nathaniel. You were saying you'd bring Eleanor into your home as a regular military spouse? Nate looked up at him, defiance burning in his eyes. Adrian smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. I'm curious. What makes you think the eldest daughter of the Hale family, the future wife of the Continental Eastern Command General, would ever be second best to you? Nate finally dropped his gaze, jaw tight. But we were engaged first. Adrian pulled 2 documents from his tuxedo pocket, stamped with the official army seal, and flung them at his face. These are marriage approval letters from Army Human Resources Command. Our wedding is fully processed, legal, and official. Everyone on this base knows about it. He slipped the papers back into his pocket, his gaze going cold. You, on the other hand, Nathaniel. You're supposed to be stationed on the Alaskan frontier. What are you doing here? No wonder you never got the engagement termination letter Eleanor signed. I had it sent straight to your post. Nate's face drained of color. Adrian went on. Deserting your border post, leading your unit away from active duty, returning to the mainland without authorization, that alone is enough to get you discharged. And then there's the unauthorized use of military sedatives, and bringing combat weapons on base. You think the Army CID doesn't know about all that? Nate went completely white. The limo pulled up smoothly to the standalone villa at Theater Command Headquarters. By the time the ceremony ended, it was dark out. The villa was strung with lights and decorations. The wedding guests slowly began to leave. The door pushed open. Adrian walked in and stood behind me. He reached out and touched the wig on my head, then smiled softly, warmth in his voice. Nathaniel's been outside on his knees for almost 2 hours. Says he needs to see you. I stared at his reflection in the vanity mirror, my voice flat. I don't want to see him. Adrian mouthed something at me in the mirror. I understood. The Army CID inspection team is in there, listening. I was surprised for a second, then nodded. Fine. Let him in. Adrian had an empty sitting room prepared, posted guards at the door, and made sure the whole thing was recorded on audio and video. When I pushed the door open, the room was packed. Nathaniel stood in the middle, his battalion commanders and staff officers lined up behind him. Riley was there too. The second they saw me, all the officers dropped to their knees. Miss Hale. Please forgive the colonel. Another man shuffled forward on his knees, voice thick with tears. Miss Hale, he loves you so much. He talked about you every single day on the frontier. We all heard him. Yeah. He carried that embroidered lucky charm you made him on every mission. Said he'd come home and marry you once the tour was over. We heard that for 4 whole years. He treasured that thing. Got mad at anyone who even touched it. Miss Hale, you two grew up together. 20 years of history. You can't just. I listened to them rattle off all the ways Nate supposedly cared about me, but my heart was still water. Nothing moved. Suddenly Riley snapped, shouting loud and sharp. Enough. She was the only one in the room who hadn't knelt. She stood there, chin held high, defiant. Why are you all groveling? What's so great about Eleanor Hale, anyway? Riley looked at me, a cruel smirk on her face. I underestimated you, that's for sure. Yesterday you were playing the victim in your quarters. Today you're marrying General Thorne and moving into command headquarters. You sure know how to play both sides. Just some gold-digging leech climbing the social ladder. Who knew the great Hale daughter was so good at that? I said nothing. Just stared at her, cold and steady. Nate suddenly spoke, his voice harsher than I'd ever heard it. Really? Shut up. Riley froze. She turned to him, stunned. What did you say? Nate stared her down, eyes red with rage, practically roaring. I said shut up. And get on your knees. Riley's face flushed bright red. Nate, are you insane? You want me to kneel for her? Nate yelled even louder. Kneel. Riley flinched at the shout. Her face went from shocked to hurt, wounded. Nate. You're yelling at me. For her? I'm your ride or die. Eleanor marries someone else, and you make me kneel to her? Nate ignored her and turned back to me. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked more broken and desperate than I'd ever seen him. His voice shook, thick with tears. Eleanor. I'm sorry. I stared at his face and said nothing. He took a step forward and reached for me, but I flinched away hard. I know I was wrong. His voice was rough and ragged. I shouldn't have let Riley shave your head. I shouldn't have said those things to hurt you. I shouldn't have. He paused, then went on. But Eleanor, Riley saved my life. Out on the frontier, I walked into an ambush, stepped on a mine. I was dying, and she carried me out of the minefield. She said she wanted to test your awareness, and I just. He couldn't finish the sentence. The officers on their knees quickly jumped in to finish for him. Miss Hale, Staff Sergeant Marlowe saved his life. He owes her everything. He couldn't say no to her. Yeah, Miss Hale. He loves you. He just didn't know how to turn her down. Too proud to back down. Miss Hale, 20 years together. You can't just throw it all away. Nate spoke again, his voice thick with begging. Eleanor, hit me, yell at me, whatever you want. Just don't leave me. Please. He looked me in the eye. I'm begging you. Please don't go. I pulled the aromatherapy pouch out of my clutch and dropped it on the floor. It rolled right to Nate's feet. I held his gaze, slow and sharp. Then why did you use this to set me up? Nate stared down at the pouch. His mouth moved, but no words came out. The day before yesterday, when you came to my quarters, I was gonna tell you the engagement was off. But you wouldn't let me finish. You just hung this by my bed, said it'd help me sleep, told me to rest up, and left. I paused, my voice sharp with bitter scorn. I thought it was a wedding gift. Even if the engagement was over, we grew up together. I never thought you'd use it to trick me, to let people humiliate me. Nate's face went white as a sheet. I kept going, every word like an ice-cold blade driving into his chest. I never thought you'd stand there and watch while someone shaved off 12 years of my hair, right down to the scalp. I reached up and pulled off my wig. I set it down on the side table, baring my smooth, shaved head. The room went dead silent. All the kneeling officers stared at the floor. None of them dared look up at me. You all thought it was so funny back in my quarters, laughing at my shaved head. Why so quiet now? Why won't you look? I turned back to Nate, voice icy. And you? Do you think a woman looks good like this? Nate couldn't say a word. His lips trembled. I said, when Riley put on that show about shaving her head, you said our bodies are gifts from our parents. Told me not to force her. I laughed then, a cold, sharp sound. Nate. Do I not have parents too? Nate finally spoke, voice barely a whisper. Eleanor, That's not what I meant. I cut him off. You just what? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I looked at the kneeling officers, then at Riley standing off to the side, slow and deliberate. You brought all these men back from the frontier without authorization. You brought combat weapons on base. You used controlled military sedatives. Do you even know what charges that carries, Nathaniel? I bent down, picked up the pouch from the floor, and held it in my palm. The sedative in here is a controlled military substance. The CID can trace exactly where it came from, and when it was compounded. I held his gaze, calm but unyielding. You can explain it all to the CID. Explain why you never got my termination letter. Explain why you abandoned your post. Explain why you used controlled military drugs on a civilian. Nate completely broke down. He took a desperate step forward, voice shaking. Eleanor. You can't do this. I did it all for you. I said nothing. Just stared at him, cold. His eyes were bloodshot, raw with desperation. I drove straight for 4 days and 4 nights with the guys, pushed through 2 border checkpoints, all for you. I wanted to make it back before the wedding. I wanted to marry you myself. I was scared you'd be waiting and worrying. I laughed, bitter and cold. So you rushed back to shave my head? The words knocked the wind out of him. He couldn't answer. I kept going, ruthless. So you were in such a hurry you slept with Riley? Nate's face turned deep purple. I scoffed. Nate. Do you even believe the words coming out of your mouth? He kept grasping at straws. Eleanor, I swear, it was all for you. If I didn't care about you, why would I drive all this way? We burned through 3 off-road trucks getting from the frontier to the base. The guys haven't slept in 3 days. A voice cut through from behind the folding screen at the back of the room, cold, sharp, and authoritative. Enough. Everyone froze at the sudden sound. A hidden door behind the screen slowly opened. A man in dress green uniform stepped out, the stars on his shoulders marking his high rank. It was General Morrison, head of the Army CID inspection team. The room went completely silent. Nate's face went ashen. His knees gave out and he crumpled to the floor. General Morrison looked at Nathaniel, his voice ice cold. The great Colonel Voss of the Elite Combat Brigade. His voice was quiet, but it made everyone in the room shake. Deserting your post. Flouting military law. His gaze swept over the crowd on their knees. He gave a small, sharp flick of his hand. Immediately, a squad of military police marched in, filling half the room. All of these individuals, General Morrison said, in violation of border duty regulations and suspected of illegal weapons possession, take them all into custody. Isolate them for investigation. The officers on the floor erupted in panic. Sir, please. Sir, we followed the colonel's orders. He told us to come. Please, sir, have mercy. The MPs didn't care. 2 per officer, they hauled them up and dragged them out. Cries and pleas filled the room. Some men kowtowed until their foreheads bled. One reached for my wedding dress, but an MP kicked him away. I watched them get dragged out one by one. Soon, half the room was empty. General Morrison's gaze landed on Riley. Riley's face was drained of all color. Malicious assault, destruction of personal property, unauthorized use of military equipment, desertion of duty, he said thoughtfully. What's the penalty for that under military law? Riley started kowtowing frantically, slamming her forehead into the floor until blood seeped through the carpet. Sir, please. I served with honor on the frontier. I saved Colonel Voss 3 times, General Morrison cut her off. Does serving with honor give you the right to ignore military law? Does it let you break into someone's home and shave their head? Resting on your laurels, flouting discipline, what's the penalty for that? Riley opened her mouth, but no sound came out. General Morrison didn't even look at her. He addressed the MPs. Dishonorable discharge. Transfer her to civilian authorities for prosecution. And circulate her file to every combat unit in the Army. Permanent blacklist. All the blood drained from Riley's face. No. She screamed. She crawled across the floor to me and grabbed the hem of my wedding dress. Eleanor. Miss Hale. General's wife, please. She looked up at me, tears streaking her face, makeup running. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have shaved your head, I shouldn't have said those things. I'll shave mine too. I'll do it right now. She pulled the military clippers from her belt and tried to shove them into my hand. You do it. Shave my head, however much you want. Just don't discharge me, don't arrest me. I didn't take them. The clippers clattered to the floor. I looked down at her, voice calm. Miss Marlowe. Military law is absolute. There's no room for sentiment. Riley froze. I stepped back, yanking my dress out of her grasp, my voice sharp with scorn. Earlier you said I was a gold-digging leech, climbing my way up. What does that make you, groveling on the floor begging for mercy? Riley shook all over. She couldn't say a word. The MPs stepped forward and hauled her to her feet. As they dragged her out, she kept looking back at me. The look in her eyes shifted from begging to bitter hatred, and finally, to total despair. Nate never looked up at Riley once, the whole time. General Morrison glanced at him, cold and final. Nathaniel Voss, you are charged with violation of military law, misuse of military supplies, desertion of duty, and trespassing. Lock him in the military brig, pending further investigation and ruling from Army Command. The MPs stepped forward and pulled Nate to his feet. They dragged him toward the door. At the threshold, he suddenly looked back at me and croaked my name. Eleanor. I didn't answer. I didn't even glance his way. He tried to say more, but the MPs pulled him out the door. The room was finally quiet. General Morrison turned to me, his voice softening slightly. Miss Hale. I'm sorry you had to go through all this. I shook my head. Thank you for upholding the law, sir. I'm fine. General Morrison nodded, said nothing more, and left with the MPs. Adrian was standing outside, leaning against a porch column. He was twisting a military knuckle duster in his fingers. When he saw me, he tucked it away and smiled. All done? I nodded. He looked at me and suddenly grinned. I thought you might cave in again. I looked up at him. What do you mean? Nate, he said. If you'd softened up, begged for leniency? General Morrison might have gone easy on him. I held his gaze, steady and sure. I would never do that. Adrian raised an eyebrow. I'd understood his hand signal earlier. The CID team was in the sitting room, recording everything. That's why I'd been surprised. But the second I'd agreed to see Nate, I'd been ready to ruin him completely. Because I hated him. I hated that he'd taken the heart I'd given him and trampled all over it. I hated even more that he'd ground my dignity into the dirt, again and again. If I hadn't turned around and married Adrian, those two beat-up army trucks would have taken me to the Voss house, to be some hidden, second-rate shadow. I stared out at the base lights glowing in the distance, and said it again. I will never soften up for him again. Over the next few days, the villa at Theater Command stayed closed to visitors. The Voss family came begging several times, but the guards turned them away every time. One day I was sitting in the yard enjoying the sun when the staff came to tell me Nate's mother was kneeling outside the command gates, refusing to leave. I sighed and got up to walk to the gate. Mrs. Voss was kneeling on the stone steps, hair messy, eyes puffy and red. When she saw me, she scrambled forward on her knees and threw herself at my feet. General's wife, please. She grabbed the hem of my dress, tears streaming down her face. Please, for the sake of them growing up together, save Nate. You two were childhood sweethearts. When you were little, he saved all his favorite treats just for you. Don't you remember? I looked down at her, voice calm. I remember. Mrs. Voss lifted her head, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Then you'll. I cut her off. I also remember how he defended Riley while she shaved my head, and called me unreasonable. Mrs. Voss froze. I remember him telling me I'd be coming into his house as a regular spouse, and calling me selfish for caring about it. Mrs. Voss's face went white. Nate may have been foolish, but your family never showed me an ounce of sincerity either, did you? If you thought so little of me from the start, why are you begging me now? Go home, Mrs. Voss. Tears poured down her face again. But he loves you, he really does. He was just led astray by that awful girl Riley. Military law is absolute, I said. There's no room for sentiment. The words died in her throat. I stepped back, pulling my dress free. Take care. I turned and walked back through the command gates. Behind me, I heard her sobbing, broken and desperate. But I didn't care anymore. That night, Adrian came to my courtyard. He sat across from me and watched me take off my wig, revealing the dark stubble already growing in. Adrian spoke, quiet admiration in his voice. You take it all in stride. I touched my scalp and smiled. It'll grow back. Adrian leaned back in his chair, casual and curious. I always wondered. How did you get over him completely, just like that, overnight? My hand stilled. I thought I'd be waiting a lot longer, he said. I turned to face him, confused. Waiting? What do you mean? His eyes were serious, no trace of humor. It means I've cared about you. For a very long time. I froze. The wig nearly slipped out of my hand. On your 17th birthday, the day Nate showed up with that medal and promised you forever? I was there in the base auditorium. I remember thinking, that's it. My chance is gone. Then he deployed to the frontier, and you waited 4 quiet years for him. I thought, that's it. Her heart's only ever been his. Then you called me on the secure line, asked me if I'd dare marry you. I was so happy that night, I didn't sleep a wink. Adrian smiled, soft warmth in his eyes. I waited. Waited for the day you'd finally let him go. I opened my mouth, but it took a second to find words. What if I'd been stupid enough to go through with it? What if I'd married him? All that waiting for nothing? Adrian raised an eyebrow, a cocky, determined edge to his voice. I would have crashed that wedding. Gone straight to Army Command if I had to. I would have stolen you away. I blinked, taken aback, and gave him a playful glare. That's barbaric. He laughed, eyes crinkling at the corners. What are they gonna do? Kick me out of the army for stealing a bride? I couldn't help but smile. His smile faded. He looked at me seriously, then reached out and brushed his fingers gently over my short stubble, so soft it barely touched. Eleanor. From now on, no one's ever gonna make you wait again. Until your hair grows back, I had a French couture house make you 24 wigs, all different styles, with matching jewelry. You can wear a new one every day. Looking at the warmth in his eyes, my throat tightened. I smiled through it. Outside the window, the base lights glowed bright, wrapping the room in soft warmth. The cold wind of the Alaskan frontier could never reach this little courtyard. For the rest of my life, there would be no more cold.